Questo?
Questo?
Sì.
Thank you very much to you. So talking about Jerome and food means addressing the other side of the moon of the subject much more often dealt with by Jerome as an ascetic theme, namely that of fasting. But the two themes cannot actually be treated separately, because even when Jerome speaks of abstention from food, beyond the symbolic value of food as an indicator of spiritual weakness, he is actually attempting to hygienic prescription and to the physiology of the organism. For example, and first of all, what exactly does fasting mean? Jerome never speaks about total deprivation of food, but more about abstinence and krateia, namely eating bread and water, as is clearly explained in letter 52 to the priest in Potion, who had asked him to write a sort of small manual precepta vivendi for those who were making their first experiences of monastic or clerical life. Among the precepts there are also those concerning fasting, and first of all the duration must be commensurate with the capacities of each one. And this invitation to stay away from excesses in both directions is found, as it is known, in various Christian orders, starting with Tertullian, in opposition to the excesses of heretic sects as Marcionite and the Gratides. Jerome reiterated this several times, often linking the spiritual value of moderation to the benefits for the body. In Epistle 22, for instance, the famous letter on virginity addressed to Eustochius, the invitation to moderation applies both in general as regards the intake of food, which in excess can even have effects comparable to those of alcohol, and at night the stomach must be empty, and in particular as regards the resumption of food intake after fasting. It is useless to prolong it beyond 1 day, because the accumulation of excessive hunger would lead to stuffing oneself and consequently to having less mental control over other passions as well. Abstinence from food is in fact seen as an action of a cold nature, which is therefore able to turn off the passions, so much so that in letter 125 it's not recommended to combine it with lukewarm baths that will counteract the effect. Also in this case it is recommended not to exceed in order not to compensate with too many meals, but also not to ruin the stomach. What is needed for the body and the soul is a moderate meal, defined not by chance with the adjective temperatus, which indicates a moderation, but also a lukewarm temperature. It is therefore maintained this kind of reference almost to the energetic quality of dietary action. Indigestion is in fact characterized by the term cruditas, which properly indicates the quality of food that cannot be cooked in the stomach, thus resulting indigestible. Moderation in food also allows to perform action that would be hindered by the inertia resulting from an abundant meal. And if the body and the spirit remain vigilant, on the contrary, you can pray and read not only before but also after the meal, as Jerome still recommends to Eustochius in letter 31. Returning to the letter 52, there follows the praise not of fasting but of simple food, such as bread, and the blame not only for those who snub bread in favor of more refined foods, pepper, date, pistachios, etc., but also for those who adopt a formula of fasting more trendy, based on sorbiciuncole, that is a liquid that can be drunk in small sips, probably a broth, and it is a term used practically only by Jerome, who also uses it several times in the Vulgate. And according to Marcellus Empiricus, it can be made with starch or as barley or rice broth. And secondly, pounded leaves, which is an extract maybe of beet, whose properties to dissolve the mucus, relieve pain and dizziness, and even laxative were praised since ancient times, especially by pink the elder. And they drink it not from a chalice but from a concha, namely a cup, or rather a vase in the shape of a mussel shell, which is where they traditionally kept oils and ointments. But the most effective, faster, fortissimum, says Jerome, is the one with on bread and water, snubbed because they are common and daily foods. Moreover, in letter 24, written in 384 to Marcella and consisting in a praise of the Virgin Azella, for this latter the fasting was almost a game. However, what is said afterward does not consist in an abstention from food, but in a different attitude, which also involves a precise diet. Azella, in fact, approaches food not with the desire to eat it, but to achieve perfection. However, she does approach to it, and indeed she uses bread, salt, and cold water to arouse more hunger than she's satisfied. The expression is not really very clear in the sense that what would ignite hunger was, I presume, the small amount taken of this food. In any case, these are once more dry and cold foods, desiccating, also proposed by illustrious example of ascetics such as Antonius or Hilarion. However, it is difficult to go back to the origins of this ascetic custom. I point out in the margin that, as far as I could see, we have other Latin sources that mention a meal based on bread, salt and water. That is the translation of Greek authors, the translation by Hieronymus of the Historia Ecclesiastica, and the translation, the ancient translation of the Vita Contemplativa of Philon of Alexandria, which is talking about the therapeutic here. However, in both the original version, as you can see, there is no trace of the salt. Eusebius makes no mention of it, and Philon speaks of pure dishes, which at most may have been misunderstood as condiment. So I wonder if there is not at the basis an evolution in considering salt from a luxury food not suitable to an ascetic diet to a symbol of simplicity compared to more refined condiments. However, in the Syriac environment, the Didascalia Apostolorum attests already in the 3rd century a 6-day pre-Easter fast, in which the first 4 were based on bread, salt and water, and the same diet is described as a form of fasting in the Act of Thomas, so maybe it was suspect. The same elements, moreover, return more or less in the description of the Cenobitic diet, again in the letter 22, where wine is allowed, as it will be in the Benedictine rule too, but only to the elderly, as a support to age fatigue, while for younger people it is an element able to break, frangere, the developing age. Evidently, it is considered the warming effect, which contrasts the weakness of age, but is excessive on an organism already warmed by youth energy. And the same distinction is already found in Celso de Medicina without further explanation, and between the regole is affirmed later with the same word of Jerome by Fructuosus of Braga. The concept is explicitly asserted in this terms also in Epistle 54 addressed to the noblewoman Furia, and reiterated as a general principle beyond cenobitic food. You should not overeat a juvenile organism already physically predisposed to passions, which are inflamed if the innards are full of wine and food. But here too it is interesting how moral discourse is likely based on physiological consideration, which is in this case explicitly rely on medical science, particularly on Galen, and on an interpretation of the theory of the 4 humors and the 4 qualities, hot, cold, humid, dry, applied to the need to prevent the body from developing sexual instinct. The concept is that if there is already heat in the body, at least until maturity, it is not beneficial to add more with food and go into overeating. And to stay healthy, you must instead eat cold food and drink. On the contrary, the elderly who are afflicted by an excess of mucus or by rheumatism, as you like, in any case but by a damp condition and cold, must eat hot food and aged wine. The prescriptions in the next paragraph are even more precise and always maintain the relationships between the level of physiological well-being and death, which appears to be in some way a consequence of the care of the soul. The way wine is consumed depends on the capacity to bear it. If the stomach is strong enough, then during gout, wine should be mixed with water, which with its frigidissima nature tempers the effect of overeating. If instead the stomach is weak, Paul had already prescribed to Timothy to make a part use of it to care for the stomach and other diseases. Even food should not be warming, this is obviously the meaning of the adjective calidum. Meat should therefore be avoided, with a predictable quotation of the passage from the letter to the Romans, but I will come back to this in a moment. But also, and this is interesting, legumes that swell or are heavy to digest. The reference here seems to be to legumes, real legumes, beans, etc., distinct from vegetables, olera, which instead are convenient for young Christians. In fact, the biblical episode cited immediately after from the beginning of Daniel's book maintains this semantic distinction and seems to allude precisely to the protein value of legumes taken by Daniel and the other 3 young Jews to remain vigorous without eating the impure foods of the table of Nebuchadnezzar. It's impossible for me to pronounce it in English. Nebuchadnezzar. But the common man, Jerome specifies, does not need the corporis cultus, but the strength of mind, which grows with the weakness of the body. The vegetarian choice of some is therefore not correct, as they believe that they are virtuous only because they abstain from meat. But if they weigh down the stomach with legumes, however in small quantities, they create an effect of overeating, manifested by indigestions and eruption, which has the same results, inflammatory in the broadest sense, even on sexual passions. Finally, it is reiterated once in food is preferable to absolute fasting of 3 days with consequent beans. The strength of Jerome's argument seems to lie above all in the fact that he never proposes penalizing dietary indication, but rather in the fact that he covers in a Christian way some hygienic prescription that we could define as common sense, generally conveyed by the medical science of the time, which focus on moderation as a rule of good health of the body and consequently of the spirit. There is not a moral evaluation of food in itself, but rather the secular observation of how perturbation on the body reflect on the spirit, and only on a second stage the Christian evaluation of spiritual perturbation. When we speak about meat, however, perhaps precisely because of the moral component involved in the debate, Jerome seems to get into trouble. The mention contained in letter 54 does not seem too problematic. The opportunity not to eat meat is justified by the usual verse of the letter to the Romans, decontextualized by its true meaning, at least, the need not to scandalize the brothers sitting at the same table. And Jerome emphasized rather the warming effect of meat achieved by ingesting equally warming foods such as legumes. However, when Jerome, having to contradict Ljubljana, has to directly face the subject of meat, the arguments become more confused, and the moral questions obscure the relationships, otherwise quite balanced, as we have seen, between the physiological and spiritual plan. I will not deal in detail with the entire argumentation. How many minutes I need?
Oh, it's 3. Yeah, just keep, because we have enough time. So
5 minutes. I will summarize the argumentation of Jerome, which present contradiction and weaknesses. Jovinian relies, as is well known, on the allusion to the passage of Genesis 9:3 to affirm that everything was created in function of man, including animals, and not using them also for food, but not exclusively for food, would therefore mean not honoring the work of divine creation. And even the example of Christ and Peter and Paul is according to this idea of the creation entirely dedicated to men. Jerome starts from, on the contrary, an absolutely clear axiom: si vis perfectum esse, bonum est carne non manducare, so completely clear. But he argues it by tethering together reasons of various kinds that seem to never really achieve the goal. For instance, distancing himself from philosophical position that reject mean consumption because they believe in metempsychosis, and the evidence of the fact that not everything that moves and lives was created for the nourishment of men, but actually it was not the statement of Jovinian, because this is this is the argumentation of Jovinian. Not every animal is for food. There are many uses of animal, all dedicated to man. But the counter-argument of Jerome is not every animal is dedicated to nourish the men, but the author uses the preparation of medicine, which is an equal utilization for men, maybe. Blue day body as well, the difference just in the ingestion or not ingestion of meat, and ad medicinam creatas. Again, he answer to the question with another question, so he doesn't know how to really demonstrate the inopportunity to eat meat. And the last one, I just show you the last one. This is quite interesting. This is the last long argumentation based on observation. That is not new. It was already in the Abstinentia of Porphyry, which is a clear source not named of Jerome against Jovinian, but is intelligent. It is the variety of food in relation to geographical areas, but even in this case the conclusions are far from being decisive, because the sense of this longer view is that everything, not just food, is relative, okay, and from the point of view of Christian, the tendency toward a spiritual and celestial dimension implies giving up meat as it is a source of pleasure. However, the relationship with all the previous example is weakened by the fact that Christians do not belong to any specific race of people, and the effect is that of clear non-inclusiveness. And the transversality of Christianity implies that Jerome started by making consideration on the relationships with the environment as the basis of eating habits, then shifts with a questionable logical process towards a dietary proposal based solely on cultural grounds. In this way, however, Jerome can come back to the level that is most congenial to him, the one repeatedly proposed in the letter, namely the correspondence between the physiological dimension and the spiritual dimension of food. But even in this case, it's not convincing. He utilizes effective image of the senses as the window for which through which the vices can penetrate in the man, and it is an image developed by from origin translated by Rufinus, but we have a great fortune in the Middle Ages. Maybe there is also an influence of Jovinian, of Lactantius, but Jerome focuses, Lactantius focuses on sight and Jerome on taste, stating that this is the most insidious sense, since without the other four senses we can survive, but without taste and food this is not possible. And it is clear also in this case that the argument is weakened by confusing the sense responsible for the appreciation of food with the food itself, which in theory can be assumed even without exercising the sense of taste, perhaps trivially because of a cold. The continuation is not entirely clear in detail, but the general sense comes back to that invitation not to burden the digestions that was the leitmotif of all the passages of the letters in which Jerome spoke of food, and to limit himself to fruits, vegetables and legumes, and great absent is the bread. The problem in the end does not seem to be the meat itself, but the fact that it is such a tasty food that you end up making it indigestible without emphasizing a clear link with the overeating that leads to sensory excitement, especially in sexual direction, which elsewhere was well present in the dietary indication of Jerome. The final impression is, I confess, rather uncertain, because Jerome almost never mentions meat in his letters, and I don't know if it's possible that the interlocutors belonged to a circle in which it was obvious that it was not used, or maybe Jerome took it for granted. However, when he has to face up the problem with Jovinian, many things do not add up. He responds to statement that Jovinian does not seem to have made. He mixes different plans and different arguments. In my opinion, the reason can only lie in the need to reject the use of meat from an ethical and spiritual point of view, leaving the physiological one in the background, which could also have given excellent arguments for the digestion, but maybe they would not have been sufficient or adequate for the objective. And it is here that it seems to me the contradiction inherent in superimposing two opposing perspectives is evident. The medical dietetic one, which provides the fundamental notion for health, knowledge, use and perhaps even control of the body, and that of a culture of rejection of the body itself, which therefore in theory did not have to deal with its well-being. Thank you very much.